Hello, I'm Stephen Rakusik with South Dakota Public Broadcasting.
I'm Del Droege, Professor of Biology at Dakota State University.
And today we're going to dissect the crayfish.
Yeah, Steve, we're going to look at crayfish today as a great example of a very interesting group of animals, the arthropods.
And what makes them so special?
Well, the arthropods are by far the most diverse and abundant group of animals on Earth. There are more species of arthropods than all other animals combined. Estimates range from well more than 1 million to up to maybe 3 million species of arthropods.
Is this a good representation then of some of those
Yeah, and
characteristics?
crayfish are easy to obtain, and they're large, and they show a really nice range of the characteristics that this group possesses. For example, probably one of the most striking things about arthropods, and one of the reasons for their success, are their appendages, jointed appendages that bend in specific directions.
And specialized probably for...
And specialized for all sorts of tasks we can look at a little bit later. But when you look at a crayfish, it's the first thing you notice, just all of these appendages coming off of them. It's like a Swiss Army knife with all the different blades for specific purposes. The other really important arthropod features that crayfish show well is the exoskeleton, the hardened cuticle, basically the outside layer of the skin that is non-living tissue that's hardened and covers and protects the body.
And how is that different than the internal skeleton?
Well, it's non-living material, so it doesn't grow with the body. So an exoskeleton has to be shed, molted, as the animal grows. It's sort of like having a suit of armor on, and so it's very protective, but as you grow, you would have to buy a new one. It also can be relatively heavy compared to other kinds of skeletons.
So limit size then?
Yeah, limit size. You think about it, most arthropods are pretty small, but they've taken that specialized small body plan and they've worked it to perfection.
So when maybe some of the students see small little bugs around, maybe they shed that at some point maybe?
Yeah, they'll shed that exoskeleton. I say anything is an arthropod if you see it running around and moving around with those appendages and it crunches when you squish it, and that's going to be an arthropod.
Okay. So should we start with looking at some of the outer structures?
Yeah, in fact, unlike many animals that we'll dissect, probably the most of the interesting, or many of the really interesting structures are on the outside of the crayfish, basically external.
I can hold it here for you if you'd like.
Okay. Well, first of all, we'll look at the external characteristics. The crayfish has a segmented body plan, and we can see that the body, is arranged in a series of segments. But now these segments are fused into into a couple of body regions. And in the crayfish, we have this part includes the head, and the part of the body that holds most of the main appendages is called the cephalothorax. Cephalo means head, so it's the head and the thorax region combined, covered by a hard outer covering, the carapace. And then this is the abdomen, and the abdomen in crayfish is segmented. You can see the serial repetition of parts here. What we think of as the tail, basically, of the crayfish. And so on all of these, so you can see a series of appendages. First of all, we can maybe look at the head. Here's the head, of course, with eyes.
Good vision?
Relatively good vision. I mean, I don't think they wouldn't have real color vision or anything, but they have, they can certainly distinguish shape and light and dark. And crustaceans, this group of arthropods that crayfish belong to, have 2 pair of antennae. And you can see one pair is real long, and then the second pair is shorter, and it's actually got 2 little forks coming off it, 2 filaments coming off it, but it's got a single base. So they have 2 pair of antennae, and all crustaceans have 2 pair. Insects have 1 pair, spiders have none. So
any known functions?
Yeah, and these are for sensory again. They pick up odors, they pick up chemicals in the water, they pick up vibration to some extent. So they're kind of like feelers out in front, and particularly you think many crayfish live in very murky kinds of water. This would be one of their primary sensory structures.
As far as at night maybe too?
And at night, and say crayfish, are often active in the dark, and so they would be able to feel for prey and other structures in the dark.
I guess what I always think of are these 2 large claws in the front.
And one of the most prominent features, I think, the pinchers, these are called chilipeds, and they're enlarged first walking legs, and these are used for defense and for capturing particular items, but probably mostly for fighting with other crayfish. So they're large, pretty formidable structures that these animals have.
I've seen before where one might have a real short one.
Yeah, and if they break, yes, they're able to regenerate. If they break off a body part, they regenerate it. It's fairly slow, and maybe they won't look the same as the other one, but they do have that ability to regenerate structures.
Should we look up back here once, maybe?
Yeah, and then for on the end of the abdomen are what are considered to be appendages. They're basically flippers. They're uropods, are the two pair on the outside, and then the central plate here is called the telson. And these, as you can see, as those fan out, as the crayfish contracts its abdomen, those are going to create force to push the animal through the water, and the crayfish will actually move backward through the water. As that abdomen contracts, it's going to push it back. So that's more of its escape behavior. Most of its behavior is going to be, or movement is going to be crawling along the bottom using its walking legs. But when they're startled or they want to get away, they'll use that powerful tail muscles to jet propel it, or not jet propel it, but push it through the water.
Anything else on top, Dale, you want to point out, or should we flip it over?
Not too much on top. Let's just flip it over. There again are the large chilipeds, and then there's four pair of walking legs here. You see these jointed appendages. And then some of the most interesting appendages in crayfish are up here near the mouth. They have three pair of appendages up near the mouth here called maxillipeds. And these maxillipeds help them handle food. And so they have a tremendous ability to hold on to food, move things through their mouth. And so those maxillipeds are very handy. And then the last pair here, and then if you push the last pair apart, here are another characteristic, mandibles, which are jaw-like structures. And these are really hard structures, stone-like hardness really, for chewing food, for breaking food down into pieces, which is a great adaptation that arthropods have to tear and mash food into small pieces for digestion. And it's hard to move these, but these are the two mandibles, and they move side to side. So arthropod jaws move in side to side, not up and down like ours. And that's something you sometimes see in movies and things they get wrong. But all arthropods, insects, crayfish and things, spiders even, their mouth parts move side to side, and they're controlled by powerful muscles inside the body.
And what type of diet would we expect from
Well, crayfish eat a lot of dead things, really. They scavenge a lot of things, but they will eat small insects and other kinds of things that they can get their hands on, or even fish.
Okay. And you're saying four pair?
Yeah, four pair of walking legs. If you count the chilipeds, they're really five pair, and these are actually in a group called the decapod crustaceans for the 10 legs, and that's the 5 pair of these walking legs.
I was thinking the jointed appendage too.
And you just see how you can see how they bend in so many different directions, and how you think about what an advantage that is to moving in different ways and in very specialized ways.
I'll lift this up here.
And then finally on the bottom of the abdomen we have these swimmerets, and these are used to help propel them, move water over their gills and the like. And this brings up an interesting difference here. As you can see in this one, the first two pair of swimmerets are modified into long, stiffer structures, more hard structures. That's male, and we compare that to the female. It doesn't have those hardened swimmerets. So the first two pair of swimmerets are enlarged and stiffened in male crayfish, and then if those structures are not present, then it's a female. And with the female, you can also see right here what's the opening where the eggs come out. So right there is the opening to the female reproductive system.
Now the two we're showing here are definitely difference in size. The male will be a lot larger.
Yeah,
is that true of the same age, or hard to say?
Well, it's hard to say, I think. And they say generally crayfish are going to get bigger as they get older. And so we'll see, and as you dissect these, if you get these from supply houses, you'll have a big range in size. These animals this is a very large specimen here. This one's probably more average and that. So you'll give a whole different range of sizes.
And as far as reproduction, internal, external?
If internal fertilization, the sperm move into the female reproductive tract, and then the eggs are fertilized and then shed outside, but the female will often hold the eggs in a pouch here, or in a batch, on her swimmerets, with her swimmerets on the end of her abdomen. And even after they hatch, sometimes these very tiny crayfish larvae will be clinging to their mother, essentially. So there's some parental care that is kind of unusual in the animal kingdom that we see in this group.
Anything else you want to show us? Should we start?
I think that's
start
most
going
of the
inside?
external anatomy. Like you say,
There's
we
a little
see-
opening here at the end. Is that?
Oh, and that's the anus. Yeah, that's a good point. The end of the digestive system. The intestine actually runs all the way to the tip of the,
So complete?
of the tail. A complete digestive system with a mouth and an anus, and it runs all the way through. You can actually see a blood vessel here too. You can see a little bit of line there. That dark line would be the ventral blood vessel, the blood vessel running along the bottom of the animal.